So, where does my story begin? My story begins where so many of your students or your kids started, and that is a high school junior who was having a successful high school career and who loved life and had good friends, and suddenly noticed that my brain seemed to be changing, and I just assumed that my personality was making some form of a shift, right? And this is what I was from 17 on. And what I didn't know was that over the next 34 years, that I would go from a teacher, an educator, to doing nothing but physical labor because of my mental health issues. I could not concentrate to sit behind a desk. I had to be out and about, throwing newspapers, using a squeegee to print t-shirts. And that's what I did until I was 52. And at age 52, I attempted suicide twice and finally ended up in a mental health unit. And I had a doctor that gave me those magical words, and it was a psychiatrist. I'd never seen a psychiatrist. And that psychiatrist said, "Mark, you have bipolar disorder, also known as manic depression." And that flipped my world at age 52 and completely changed the trajectory of my life. So at 52, I don't have a job. I've lost my job. I've literally had 6 car accidents the year before I attempted. And now I have to figure out what I'm going to do every day with full days and no agenda. And what I did was I volunteered for a mental health organization called Chad's Coalition in St. Louis. And as I got well, and as I began to go from volunteer to eventually a full-time employee, I took another step, and that was I started looking at the research in Missouri to see where our greatest need was concerning mental illness and mental wellness. And what I found was we had drastically higher suicide rates in the rural counties of Missouri. Not unlike what's going on here in Colorado. Okay, the difference is this. In Missouri, we have 115 counties. We don't have psychiatrists of any kind in 75 of those counties. 2/3 of our counties have no psychiatric care. One difference, though, in the statistics with St. Louis and Missouri and Colorado is the fact that in Missouri, we don't have one state that has twice the national suicide rate of 12.5%. Colorado has 15 states, double the national suicide rate. These statistics mean something. We don't always know what they mean, but they mean something, right? And so what we try to do is we try to dismantle this big problem of suicide, and we try to see what are the 3 or 4 or 5 things that we could do in any state and likely make a difference. When we walked across the state, we got to know a lot of different people in a lot of different communities and in a lot of different schools. And it took us 17 days, and my life has been one serendipitous moment after another, starting at the age of 52. The first thing that happened was I decided I was going to walk across the state of Missouri and try to bring mental health awareness to all these rural counties of Missouri. Okay, 17 days, 200 miles. I should have chosen Rhode Island. So my son had just graduated from USC's film school. He was 23. And when I told him what I was going to do, he said, "Dad, I'm going to go with you." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "I'm going to film it. I just got my degree in film. I'm going to film what you do and see where that goes." Now, I envisioned him with his cell phone following me into these schools and observing these conversations, but he had a different idea. He had a group of people in California where he worked who were all in the film industry, and one of them happened to be a young man named Josh Salzberg, who was an editor and a director and had done quite a few things with Will Ferrell and people like that out in California. And when he told Josh what he was going to do, Josh said, "Well, we're going to get a crew and we're going to follow you and we're going to do this like we should do it." So we had a crew, and they followed. And by the end of the 17 days, we had 120 hours of footage. And then they had to decide what the story was. And they must have put together 10 different versions of that documentary. And the one they came up with, and the one that we've used for the last year and a half, and that has gone to film festivals, is the one where my son and I are basically taking a father and son road trip talking about their own mental health. And that's what the documentary is about. This kind of event is awesome. It's phenomenal. The fact that you're going to use this money for mental health first aid is key. And I got to tell you, you're way ahead of Missouri when it comes to that. And that's phenomenal. But tonight, if you come tonight, and you don't have to walk, but if you just come tonight and we'll watch the documentary with us, and after the Q&A, see what happens. And it's typically, if we have 200 people there, we'll do the Q&A, and then 20 people, about 10%, will stay after to talk about personal issues that they're dealing with related to mental illness and mental wellness. And that's honestly what my mission is. It's to get down to that level to where we can maybe change lives in those 15 or 20 people that show up and stay. I have 2 or 3 different things that I view as important as a state that I wish Missouri would adopt, and I want to just quickly hit those before we close. The first thing that I think needs to happen, and I'm sitting next to Pete Lee, state legislature for Colorado, and we've been talking through dinner. And I think one of the most important things that can happen and that needs to happen is I think it needs to be mandated that any school has every single teacher trained in suicide prevention and awareness. Every single school. You are more progressive than Missouri. And I think that's probably going to be part of your legislative social emotional package. Let me tell you what happened in Missouri. We tried to pass that, and last year it didn't pass, but I want to tell you what happened in Missouri while they were trying to pass that bill. We lost our state auditor to suicide. 8 weeks later, we lost his spokesperson to suicide, and we nearly lost a 3rd state rep to suicide. And we didn't even pass a bill to require teachers to have 3 hours of mental health awareness. This year they passed it. It's not mandatory. It's if you choose to do this. And I don't think that's right. I think anybody who has our children 6 to 7 hours a day needs to have some kind of awareness regarding mental wellness, mental illness, and suicide prevention. Okay? The second thing that I think is important, in St. Louis, I've spent tons of time in health classes giving a suicide prevention awareness presentation. And every time we do that, we've done it to 23,000 students last year. Every time we do that, we give them a confidential slip of paper. And if they have any need regarding mental health that they want to talk about, they check that. Those go to the counselor and they get help. That's number 2. Every single health teacher should be doing a suicide prevention awareness 5 to 7 days in their health class. It should be spent on mental health awareness. That's only 5 to 7 days out of who knows how many days they spend in health. That's number 2. And number 3, I think we have to learn from other people in other countries. And I think a really good example is Northern European countries who spend 3 times what we spend on Head Start or any of the pre-K programs. And what they've done is they've created a group of young people that understand social and emotional health and how important that is in their life, because that's what they focus on. 3 times the amount of money that we spend. What's their suicide rate? 30% less than ours in every one of those Northern European countries. Plus the fact that they're developing a group of young people that may actually help destigmatize what has become a topic that we don't want to talk about. I have not written a letter since my wife and I were dating when I was 26. And this last year, with the documentary being out, and we ended up writing a book, and I finally wrote a letter to my family that I wanted them to understand where I was a few years ago and why those attempts happened. So I'm going to finish today with about a 1 or 1.5 page letter that I wrote Some of you have the book today. I know some of you have gotten this. This is a letter to my family. This was written in March. I write this letter knowing I did not leave a note of explanation for my actions on March 15th of 2011. I need Eric, Laura, Ben, and Lisa to know that psychosis and depression shaped my thoughts and behaviors that morning, and love, loyalty, even regret were nowhere on my emotional landscape. Please forgive me for my actions. Life is so full of daily gifts now. I can't ever imagine going back to a place of such confusion and despair. Today, my life includes intention, faith, family, and a desire to work in the service of others. Every morning is a reality check. I have bipolar disorder, and it will never go away. What will I do today to make me healthier than yesterday? Will I disclose when my thoughts are skewed and my internal alarm is triggered? Are meds enough, or should I see my therapist more regularly? I am still emotionally numbed by the lithium and Seroquel, and probably always will be. Thank you for forgiving me for those lost parts. My promise is to do everything possible to stay well, so that none of you have to care for me. My staying well may frustrate all of you at times. Staying well means extra sleep, downtime, journaling, exercise, and other inconvenient needs that conflict with family needs. I desire a lot of alone time, which helps me recharge. It may seem self-indulgent, but this is actually self-preservation. Thank you for acting as my daily support group and for accepting this new version of me. I wouldn't still be here if you all decided my life changes were unacceptable or too selfish. I love each of you for your gifts and uniqueness and for your empathy toward me and others who live with a mental illness. Lisa, thank you for staying with me and never wavering in your love and support. Laura and Ben, none of the work we do today would be possible had you not allowed the documentary to be completed. It has been an invasion of your personal lives. I love you both. Finally, Eric, we grew in our relationship only by talking honestly and openly about my suicide attempts while walking across the state together. My answers to your questions had to be difficult to hear and digest, but you were better for having asked, and your family is here for you. If I had completed a suicide 5 years ago, you would have been left with so many questions and not nearly enough answers for someone dealing with his own mental illness. Most importantly, you would have become part of a group who had a parent die by suicide, increasing your chances of attempting one day. That is the thought that most haunts me. Please know your mom and I will continue to walk with you every day, as no one does it alone. Dad.